Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel and welcome to every single book I read in April and May. I moved in April, so I decided to do one big monthly wrap up. So I have 18 books to talk about in today's video with a total of 6,696 pages. I read 7 romance books, 4 fiction books, 4 YA books, 2 mystery thrillers, and 1 nonfiction. I also listened to 2 of the books and I borrowed 5 of these books from the library. We'll start with the first of many romance books I've read over the past couple of months. Honestly, as soon as it starts to get warm out, I'm back to picking up romance books left and right. So I started off April by reading First Time Caller. I think this is my first book by this author and I ended up rating it 3 stars. The premise of this book is super interesting. You have a daughter who ends up calling a radio show asking for advice for her mom, and her mom finds out that her daughter did this and is very upset with her daughter, but this whole conversation ends up leading the mom to being a guest on this radio show where they kind of try to set her up and share her search for true love. And there was nothing particularly wrong with this book. Like, there's no certain reason as to why this book was a 3-star, but it just felt very middle of the road. I feel like there's better romance books out there. This book was also just very forgettable to me. And then I read Girl in Pieces, which was yet another 3-star read. This book starts off very hard-hitting with our main character in a psych ward in a hospital, so definitely check the trigger warnings on this book. But the beginning of this book ends up being so different than the end of this book, and I don't really enjoy books that are like that. I forgot I actually own this book, but I was comparing the beginning of this book to A Little Life, and it ends up being very, very, very different to A Little Life, which if you haven't heard of A Little Life before, A Little Life is another very, very, very sad book. So definitely need to check the trigger warnings on that one, but I enjoyed that book way more than this one. So I feel like I did this book a disservice by comparing it to A Little Life, because it kind of set this book up for failure just a little bit because of how much I enjoy A Little Life. But this is not me recommending A Little Life to you, because you will be absolutely wrecked after reading A Little Life. So it's kind of good that this book ended up not being like A Little Life, because it didn't wreck me apart, although it was very sad. And then I read If You Had Been With Me, which I ended up giving this one a 4-star. It's a YA romance where we follow our main character pretty much throughout all of high school. It's a very character-focused book, so if you don't like books that aren't like that, I don't think I would recommend this one. And honestly, this book had very high potential to be a 5-star for me until I got to the ending, and I guess pretty much the entire ending, which honestly just had me so sad because I hate when that happens in books. I hate being able to guess the ending, especially because I feel like in this book we weren't supposed to be able to guess the ending, but I thought it was so obvious the entire book how it was going to end, especially because in this book you get a flash forward in the first chapter of the book, and I normally like when books do that, but this one just spoiled the whole book, I feel like. But that's just my opinion. I feel like a lot of people love this book. And then I read How to Walk Away, which is a 4.5-star book for me. Another sad book where just a lot of sad things happen to our main character. I don't want to give away a ton of this book because I went into this book pretty blind, and I feel like that actually helped my reading experience a ton. But I will say something very major, very life-changing and devastating happens in the beginning of this book to our main character, and she kind of spends the rest of the book trying to navigate this new life that she now has to lead because of what happened in the beginning of the book. So a lot of the book is her trying to overcome these challenges and her growing and changing as a person. And then you do get like a very, very subplot of romance, which I did enjoy that, but I also thought it was like very obvious where that part of the book was going. But I still enjoyed it. Obviously, I gave it a 4.5-star. I feel like an actual grandma because my back is already hurting from sitting on the floor. But then I read The 5-Star Weekend by Elle and Hilderbrand, which was my first summary read of the season. It was kind of early to read this book because I read it in April, but 100% worth it. I love Elle and Hilderbrand. I've read so many of her books, and I don't think that there's that many books that I've rated a 3-star, and there's definitely none of her books that I've rated less than a 3-star. So she is my go-to summary author read. That didn't really make sense, but you know what I mean. And I actually eventually want to read every single one of her books, so I'm getting there very slowly but surely. But I rated this one a 4-star. I did really like it, but there was just one character in this book that drove me so crazy, and I feel like she didn't get enough retribution for her actions because she does something very, very, very horrible, and it's not fully her fault like at all. Like, things get explained, but I still feel like she kind of got away on an easier foot than I would have let her off if I was Elle and Hilderbrand. But basically the premise of this book is that you have our main character and she's really going through it. Like, she has just had a lot of bad things happen to her back to back, and she hears about someone doing this 5-star weekend, and so she decides to go to Nantucket and do this 5-star weekend with a bunch of her friends, and basically she's like planning the perfect weekend. But obviously nothing's gonna be perfect. Things go wrong. And you also get multiple point of views in this book, I believe. But it's another character focused book. I feel like a lot of Elle and Hilderbrand's books are character focused, and they either have like a subplot of romance or a subplot of like some type type of mystery, and I really enjoy that. And then I read Sunrise on the Reaping, which was a 4.5-star read for me. I feel like so many people read this book in April and so many people really loved it. And obviously I loved it too. I'm always iffy about books that come out years and years and years after the original series, but the past 2 books that Suzanne Collins has come out with have obviously been years after the original Hunger Games trilogy got published, but they have both been so unbelievably good. I feel like everyone has talked about this book already, so I'm just going to give a quick little synopsis. You're basically following Hamish when he goes through his Hunger Games, and I think his Hunger Games are like 25 years before the original Hunger Games or something like that. So things have obviously changed from his Hunger Games versus other Hunger Games, and I loved going back and hearing about his backstory, his experience with the games, and it just brought me right back to my teenage self that was obsessed with the Hunger Games. Literally, my sister and I loved the Hunger Games so much. We had like little Mockingjay pins, and we had like a fake bow and arrow that we would shoot out in the backyard. We were just obsessed with the Hunger Games. I feel like this book just brought back my love for the Hunger Games, because not only does it bring that little bit of nostalgia back, but it's just so good on its own. Like, even if you have no idea about the Hunger Games and you decide you want to pick up the Hunger Games trilogy and read the other prequel as well and then go and read this book, it would still be hard hitting for you. Sorry for the angle change, my camera died, but I was basically just saying that I recommend reading these books in publication order. And then I read Daisy Haynes' The Great Undoing, which was my only 5-star read in April and May, unless you count rereads, because I did do a couple 5-star rereads. But this is, I think, the 3rd book in a series. Actually, it's the 4th book in the series. This is part of the Magnolia Parks universe. And if you don't know anything about the whole Magnolia Parks universe, you basically get 2 different point of views. You get Daisy's books and you get Magnolia's books, and they kind of just interchange, but then they also kind of take place at the same time. So this book takes place at the same time as the last Magnolia book, and I just knew that I would love this book because I loved the last Magnolia book so much, and I knew that we would get part of that plot line in this book, just in a different point of view, and I was so excited and so ready for that. I'm also just so obsessed with Julian, who is Daisy's brother. But basically you are following this group of London socialites, and there's also just some illegal activities going on specifically in Daisy's books. But I love reading about rich socialites in London, very much giving Gossip Girl vibes, especially with Magnolia and BJ's relationship, because these books are very much toxic romance, and I obviously can't tell you a ton about what goes on in this book because it would definitely spoil some of the series. But I definitely feel like it's helpful to go into the series knowing that they are toxic romance, so that you don't go in expecting like a fun, cute rom-com-y moment, because that's not what these books are at all. But these books are very popular, and if you have been looking for a sign to start them, this is your sign, because I'm obsessed with these books. Yeah, that's it. I just love them. And then I read Big Summer, which I rated 3 stars, and in this book you're following our main character, who is, I think she's a bridesmaid, or no, she's the maid of honor to her best friend from high school, and they haven't really talked in a long time, so they're kind of honestly reconnecting while she is her maid of honor, and you kind of get more information on that and like more background on her friendship and their relationship and things like that. But they've obviously had a little bit of a rockier path, and they're just now reconnecting. Drew, who is the friend that's getting married, doesn't really have a ton of friendships, so you kind of deep dive into what happened between them, their past, how they were friends in high school, why they stopped being friends, things like that. And I will say, I loved the first half of this book so much, but the second half had such an odd turn. And I literally said earlier in this video that I don't love when the beginning of a book is very different than the last half of the book, and that's what happened with this book. But my main problem with the last half of this book is that it was reminding me so much of a different Elin Hilderbrand book that I read, and I don't want to say which one because I don't want to spoil this book, especially if you've read the other Elin Hilderbrand book. But it became so much like that book. Like, it felt way too copy and paste, but not as good. And I hate saying that because that sounds so mean, but like, it was just too similar that it turned me off to this book, even though the beginning of this book was so good. And I was so upset when it changed, because I was like, this book seriously had potential to be a 5-star for me until this switch, and I really just did not like where the story ended up going because of that switch. And I just spent a lot of the book comparing it to Elin Hilderbrand, because the Elin Hilderbrand book that I'm referencing is one that I really enjoy. So that was very disappointing. And then I read She and Her Cat stories. I'm not sure if I meant to read the stories version of this book, but I saw it in Barnes Noble a while ago and I was like, oh, this book sounds really interesting. Like, I loved A Dog's Purpose and I was looking for A Dog's Purpose, but in cat form. So if you read the version of this book that's not stories, let me know if you think that's similar to A Dog's Purpose and you think I should read it. A Dog's Purpose is written from the dog's point of view and She and Her Cat is written from the cat's point of view, but this is all short stories. So I think that there's either 3 or 4. And I did enjoy this book, obviously. I gave it a 3 stars, so it wasn't bad, but it was nowhere close to being on the level of A Dog's Purpose. A Dog's Purpose was just very hard hitting for me. I loved that book so much. 100% a 5-star, and it's a book I think about to this day. But I was looking for a book like that in cat form because if you didn't know, I have a cat. I love her so much. And so I was just hoping to find something like that. And although it is so fun for me to read a book from a cat's perspective, it wasn't as hard hitting as A Dog's Purpose was. So I don't know if I meant to read the stories version or if I meant to read like the OG. I don't really know, honestly, but let me know what you guys think I should do, if I should go and read like the OG one, because I believe the stories version came out after the OG version did, but I'm not entirely sure. And then I read Promise Me Sunshine. I rated this a 4-star. This was a romance and our main character is very much going through it. Like, life is throwing a lot of curveballs at her and this book discusses grief a lot. And I normally don't enjoy books that discuss grief to this level, but there's something about the way the author wrote this book that made me really enjoy it. Normally grief in books is just too sad for me. I don't enjoy it. But with this one, there was just something about the way that she intertwined this heavy topic of grief with the romance and the friendship and just the growth the main character had while still being able to discuss grief in a realistic way. It was beautiful. I honestly don't remember why this wasn't a 5-star other than the fact that like I forgot about it a little bit, to be so honest. Like, now that it's a month since I've read this book, I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot I read that. But it was very good. I 100% recommend this book. Just know before going into it that they discuss grief a lot in this book. And that is every single book I read in April. Moving on to what I read in May, I actually started the month off with an audiobook. I listened to The Perfect Marriage. Originally, I rated this 3-star, but I pushed my rating down to a 2.5. And honestly, just the more I think about this book, the more I'm like, how did this book become this popular? Like, I feel like whenever I don't like a book, it always sounds so mean, but this book was just not for me. I love a good thriller. I love a good mystery, and a lot of the time I actually end up really enjoying those audiobooks. And so I was very excited when I saw that this book was available on Libby. Basically, you're following this couple and the wife is a lawyer, so she's very busy, she's very career oriented, and the MMC is an author, but something happens and he ends up going on trial, and so the wife is his defendant. Wait, what? No. The wife is his lawyer. And the whole time in this book, I knew what the twist was going to be. Like, I guessed it at the very beginning and I was like, there's no way I'm right because this is so obvious to me. Yeah, I was right. I was more shocked by the fact that I was right so early on in the book than I was shocked by the plot twist, because I already knew that it was coming. You know what I mean? Like, I already guessed it so early on, which is devastating to me. I'm just like, how? I feel like this was so obvious. So because of that, I can't recommend this book. I feel like there's just so many other good thrillers out there. So just personal preference, did not like this one. I don't like when I can guess the plot twist in a thriller. I also don't like when they're too outlandish, but like I don't want to guess them either. So I'm a little bit picky when it comes to thrillers. And then I read Say You'll Remember Me, which was another slightly disappointing book. I feel like a lot of people had kind of iffy thoughts on this one. I rated this a 3-star, so it wasn't horrible by any means. But I was excited to read this one because I do really enjoy Jimenez's writing. Our main male character is a vet and our main female character comes in to his vet clinic and that's like their whole meet cute situation. But it was a little bit insta-lovey and I just felt like their connection was so intense so quick, and she low-key kind of like, she didn't play him, but the beginning of the book with the whole like thing that happens in the beginning, I was like, okay, didn't really love that because that's kind of rude. I'm not gonna go into detail there, but if you've read the book, I feel like you'll know what I'm talking about. But basically they decide to go and do this relationship, and there's just one character in this book that had to give up so much to make this relationship work. And obviously a relationship is gonna have sacrifices, but I felt like in this relationship a lot of the sacrifices were very one-sided, and that was my main problem with it. I also guessed the ending of the book with like 70% left. I was like, this is what's gonna happen, and that's exactly exactly what happened. And also there were a couple things, particularly with like the vet clinic, that just felt like it was way too easy. And I feel like that's all I can say without spoiling anything. And I obviously don't want to spoil anything, but I just feel like there's other Abby Jimenez books that I have enjoyed more than this one. And I actually reread 3 books in May, starting with Cress, which is the 3rd book in the Lunar Chronicles series. The series is YA fantasy and I highly recommend the series. Even upon my reread, I rated this book at 5 stars. I will say it is pretty YA at times, if you know what I mean, so I don't necessarily recommend this for everyone, but if you're someone that likes reading the YA genre, I definitely recommend this one. Each book in the series follows a loose fairy tale retelling, so this one is Rapunzel. There's not a ton I can say about this book because obviously it's the 3rd book in the series, but the 1st book is Cinder and it's a Cinderella retelling, and she's kind of dealing with a lot of things going on. She's a mechanic and her kingdom has this deadly plague going on, and for some reason the plague in this book was really freaking me out, and I don't know exactly why, because you hear about the plague in all 3 of the books, but particularly in this one it was a little nerve-wracking because as soon as you start to get symptoms you're like gone, like goodbye, you know what I mean, which was just nerve-wracking to me for some reason. But highly recommend this entire series. I feel like there's not a ton I can say about it without giving it away. And then I listened to Finlay Donovan Digs Her Own Grave. This is the most current book that is out in this series, and I have listened to every single one of these books and I highly recommend listening to them. There's something about this audiobook that I just eat up the audiobook every single time. I don't know what it is. There's something about it that I just love. And obviously I can't tell you much about this one because it's so deep into a series, but the 1st book is Finlay Donovan is Killing It, I think. And basically our main character is an author and she's meeting with her publicist in a Panera Bread, and she's outlining this mystery book that she wants to write, and the woman sitting at the table next to her thinks she's a hitman, so she tries to basically pay Finlay to her husband, which is crazy because Finlay's like, no, like I'm an author, like that's not what I do. And this woman's like not having it. Like she's not listening to Finlay say this at all. She's like, no, I'm hearing you, but I'm not listening. You know what I mean? So very fun premise. I feel like these books are very unique in the sense that these books are like rom-com meets mystery, and I'm obsessed with that. I had this vivid memory of listening to the 1st book while sitting at my desk, and I just remember laughing and kicking my feet because I enjoyed this book so much. And then I read a nonfiction book. This is my 3rd nonfiction of the year and I had a goal of reading 10. So I need to get on reading my nonfiction books, but this is Reasons to Stay Alive and I really enjoyed this book. It's categorized as self-help and memoir, which I've never read a book that is categorized in both of those genres before. So it was a very unique read, and he basically talks about his mental health struggles and how he's dealt with them. And he does a really good job of making these topics not super heavy. Like he managed to have an underlying message of hope in this book while kind of sharing tips in the self-helpy form and also sharing his life and his experience. And I really enjoyed this book. Highly recommend it. I feel like there's not a ton I can say other than that, but it was just definitely one of the more unique memoirs that I have read before because like I said, it's combined with self-help, which I thought was really cool. And then the last book I read in May that was not a reread was Yours Truly by Abby Jimenez, which is kind of sad because I was disappointed by 2 of her books in May. And that's not saying I hated this book because I obviously didn't. It's a 3-star, which is not bad by any means. I just had very high expectations for this book because I loved the 1st book in this interconnected series so much that I was so excited to read this one. And the trope in this book, I just find it a little bit overdone. Like I'm a little bit tired of the trope in this book. So that was very much personal preference. Nothing really wrong with this book, but I'm also the kind of reader that if I don't love the characters, I'm most likely not gonna love the book. And this book is interesting to me because I was not loving Jacob, who is our MMC in the beginning of the book, and then towards the end of the book I switched to not liking our female main character. So it kind of flip-flopped for me, which is funny but also very sad because I had such high expectations for this book and I really wanted to enjoy it. There's also times in this book where the characters felt a little bit too deep, and there was also a couple moments where this book was driving me absolutely crazy because you get both of their point of views, and just the thought process of one of our characters was driving me absolutely crazy. I was like, just communicate with each other and this problem would be solved. Like this wouldn't even be a problem. The book would be a million times shorter as well. So that part of the book really drove me crazy. But if you like Abby Jimenez and you like romance, I obviously still recommend it. It was mostly just not a fan of the trope in this book. I just have seen it done way too many times and I do really enjoy it, but I kind of need a break from this trope. And then I did 2 more rereads in May, which we'll talk about them at the same time because they are part of a series. I read The Summer I Turned Pretty and It's Not Summer Without You. These are the first 2 books in the Summer I Turned Pretty trilogy. I wasn't going to read the 3rd book, but I think I'm actually going going to listen to it, but I'm unsure because I wanted to at least reread the first 2 books before the 3rd season came out, and I'm not sure if I want the books that fresh in my mind or not. I haven't decided yet. But if you're not familiar with this trilogy, it is a YA romance trilogy, and there's a little love triangle going on. So you have 2 families and they always come to this beach house every single summer. It is a perfect little summery beachy read, but I will say I do not recommend this book unless you're like a true YA age range, because at least for me, I found it to be a little bit immature at times. But when I read this book in middle school, I ate this book up. I loved this whole series so much. So I honestly only recommend these books to a true YA age range. If you are looking for a YA romance or you're in that age range, 100% recommend these books, especially for the summertime, because they give off that summer vibe. And now my camera is overheating, so I'm going to take that as a sign that I have been yapping for long enough. That is every single book I read in April and May. Thank you all so much for watching. Don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!